Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We are relatively few in number, but we are sufficiently quorate to be able to carry on our business. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Staffordshire Sacre. I think we would like to welcome two new members here who come from the Archdiocese of Birmingham, representing the Catholic sector in education. And with a wider interest, of course, in the well-being of our education system and the religious education that is offered. Could you tell us your names, please?
Yes, I'm Lisa Gretton. I'm Vicky Wayman.
Okay. The acoustics in this room are dreadful. If you're speaking, could you press the bottom button and then your light will go red?
Yes, I'm Lisa Gretton.
I'm Vicky Wayman.
And if we could go quickly round introducing ourselves and the people we represent.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. County Councillor Mike Wilcox, representing Burntwood South Division.
County Councillor Paul Northcott, representing Logheads and Newcastle Rural Division.
Thank you.
I'm Gabby Oldfield and I represent the Quakers.
I'm Maddie Bell and I represent the YouthNet, but I also represent the Baptists.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes.
I'm Councillor Kath Perry, County Councillor. I represent Essington, Great Worley, Chesley and Hay and that side of South Staffordshire. Thank you.
And here's our support team.
Yes, Jo Pieck, and I'm the clerk for the meeting.
Simon Humble, and I'm the Governance Support Manager. This might be the only time you ever see me at this meeting.
And I'm Michael Metcalfe, representing the Church of England and the elected chair for 1 year at a time.
And I'm Mary Gale, and I'm the advisor to Sacre, and I'm commissioned by Staffordshire County Council and the trading arm called Entrust to support all of the information for the meeting and to support everybody in the room if they need any information.
We are unlikely to have any very formal votes this afternoon, so I won't go through the machinery for that at this time. Sacre is a rather unique body in the way it operates, but this afternoon we're going to be in an advisory conversational mode when it won't be necessary to be quorate, except perhaps for the receipt of the minutes, which we'll come on to in a moment. Have we apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you. We've had apologies from Lauren Ward, Sam Kerwin, Sean Miles, Zoe Cahalan, Vicky Priestley, Paul Snape and Jacqueline Bandar. Thank you.
And we add to those Hifsa Iqbal if she doesn't arrive. That wasn't Hifsa Iqbal. She is the newly appointed representative for the Muslim community, and we would wish to welcome her in her absence, but hopefully we'll see her in due course physically as well. Welcome to our further councillor member, Councillor Philip Atkins. We've just introduced ourselves, Philip, so... Thank you very much. Any update on membership other than what we've just said, Mary? We do have vacancies and we are looking to fill these as best as we can.
Yeah, sorry. So it's obviously just to welcome the new members as we already have, which is fantastic. And yes, we do have some vacancies in our Free Church, Hindu, Jewish, Sikh and with the Salvation Army denominations. Thank you.
So any persons that you think might be able to represent themselves, their bodies on Sacre, that would be welcome. I have to say we normally have 5 Church of England people here, of whom the majority normally attend, and I'm feeling a little bit, as they say in the Bible, like a lodge in a cucumber field, being the only one. So I shall have to uphold the Anglican presence as well. Okay. Now, we do have declaration of any other business, and this is in case people wish to raise matters which aren't on the agenda. If people don't raise any other business at this point, we normally don't allow it to be included at the end. So is there any other business that people wish to register at this point? Relevant to our business, that is. I mean, there may be many other points that people wish to raise. Okay, thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated, and you should have had the opportunity to look through them. I'm going to go through them very quickly, page by page. Any corrections on page 1? Page 2? Or page 6 as it is in these papers. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10 and page 11. All these were a record of quite a substantial meeting that we had last time. Unless there are any objections, may I sign these as a true record of that meeting? Okay, thank you. As you'll see, we don't include matters arising from the minutes here, but I'll pause briefly in case anybody wishes to. Okay. So on to item 7, update, or is it 6? Update on key issues, which I hand over to Mary with, and we've got one very substantial item coming in this one.
Well, with regard as well to matters arising, many of those matters arising are actually included in the update on the key issues. That's why we don't have too many matters arising. So the first aspect, you can see, you've got it in front of you, is the annual report that we have to declare as... Hello, Kath.
Can we have one microphone, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was echoing or something.
So the first thing we have on the key issues is the annual report, and we looked at that last time, the annual report of the work that SACRE has been undertaking over the previous year, and we gave you 10 days in which to actually indicate whether there were to be any changes. There were no changes coming from yourselves. Michael indicated a couple of changes. I then sent the draft report off to Tim Moss. Tim Moss indicated a couple of changes, and one of them was that I had omitted from the report the examination results from Paisley Catholic School, so I have added those to that report. Very remiss of me. In my defence, they do a separate type of assessment, a GCSE and A-level paper anyway, and they were included on a separate sheet which was not included with the rest of the results. So I've sorted that out, and Tim's really pleased. So the annual report now I will send back to Tim Moss with all of those amendments from yourselves and from obviously what he has indicated he would like to be changed. And then if he gives the okay, it then goes off to various bodies within the county, and it's available to all the schools as well. And that will be advertised through something called the e-bag, the electronic bag for head teachers. It will also be advertised in something called the Governor Information Packs that I write for all schools in Staffordshire, so I'll be flagging it up in there. And also when we come to the part where we look at website, it will be actually added to our SACRE website. So that's the first thing. You can see actually on the annual report section, we have got a link to the SACRE website, and in due course, it will be included in that.
Just hold on a moment. Can I add to that I have requested the chairperson of the Suitable Scrutiny Committee that the committee receives our annual report. I had thought that it had gone out to schools already, but it obviously hasn't. But I have said that it's within the County Council's offices, Simon, and you may get a request for it so that it can be included in the papers for the Scrutiny and Overview and Scrutiny Committee for Prosperous Staffordshire, the Prosperous Scrutiny and Overview Committee, which is where schools lie and education at the moment. So thank you very much, and hopefully the county councils will have an opportunity to see the work that Sacre does and to get some idea of what's going on in schools in this area. Thanks, Mary.
The next section is to do with the West Hill Legacy Project. And for those of you who are new to Sacre, this was the amount of money that we received a number of years ago to help and support schools and the pupils in those schools, from nursery all the way up to high schools, in understanding the basics with regard to our agreed syllabus. So within that, we would include workshops on Islam, and we have included in the past workshops on Christianity, which we have looked at with support of Maddie Bell and Sam Phillips. And I know, Maddie, welcome back. Lovely to see you here again, and I hope the baby's gorgeous. So with regard to that legacy project, what happens is that we have money now, not from that project, but we have money within our Sacre budget that we actually pay for workshops in schools. We had a workshop trainer, her name was Wahida, and she used to deliver those projects. Things went a bit quiet before Christmas, so I had to find out why, and unfortunately she passed away. And so therefore she was unable to, Entrust were unable to support us with that. I've had a meeting with Entrust. They don't have anybody who is able to commit to those workshops. So I approached somebody who is now on Sacre but wasn't at that time, a person called Hifsa Iqbal, and she will be coming to the meetings starting in June, and she actually is able to fulfill that role as trainer. So you can see now I have a list on this page 14, of the workshops that she has already undertaken. And there's just 2 amendments. She was unable to commit to the 5th of February and the 6th of February due to other commitments, but she will be doing those in the summer term. And today, the reason she's not here is actually she's at Flashley Primary, and she was asked to do the workshop there before she knew she was a member of Sacre. And that person who is at Flashley came to our meeting last time. Her name was Taryn, and I felt it was really important that we supported Taryn at her school with the workshop, and so I asked her to use that as a priority aspect. All of that, the payments for that are paid out of the Sacre budget, and you will see all of that in the budget later on. We've had some great feedback already from Hifsa's workshops, and I've included that feedback to you on page 15 and page 16. And you can see the types of things we cover. Any questions on that part? So the next part that I've included here regards Ofsted reports on religious education, religious studies in schools. And I've given you on page 17 an extract from the Ofsted's annual report. In this annual report, they include information about all subjects and any subjects, anything that's come to their notice. And what they have done in this annual report, they have included a section on religious education in schools, and generally they're saying it's of a poor quality. So I have included here all the words that they have indicated in their report. Schools do not seem to still realise it's a statutory subject in all schools. They don't realise that. And we know that from looking at the way, in particular, high schools and middle schools commit the amount of hours to the teaching of religious education through something called the workforce data. And I can say in Staffordshire, of all the schools that we have, because now we have in Staffordshire 504 schools, because we had a new one built just a couple of weeks ago, there only seems to be one school that does not teach religious education. Whereas when we started looking at this 4 or 5 years ago, there were a great number that weren't teaching religious education. So the message is definitely out there in Staffordshire schools, and we've just got this one school to work on. Where there is a difficulty in actually teaching religious education, what tends to happen is I then go along to that school and I carry out the head teacher performance management appraisal. And under that appraisal, we then might have religious education or spiritual, moral, social, cultural. And we all know appraisal is performance-related pay. So, you know, it's worked. So that's good news, isn't it? So the Ofsted report here is generally for the whole country. It's not just for Staffordshire. And I would like to say in Staffordshire, it's a very much improved picture. Also, it's not included here, but just for you to know that schools who are of a religious character also have a different type of inspection. They have a double inspection called a Section 48 inspection, and in the Anglican, in the Anglican schools, we call it SIAMS, and in the Catholic, you call it...
It's Catholic Schools Inspectorate.
Very simple, Catholic Schools Inspectorate. I was in a school last week and they don't have to, but they shared their SIAMS report with me. And within that report, it says this school is following the agreed syllabus for Staffordshire, and the RE is of a high profile and a high status in the school. It is well resourced and underpinned by the school vision. I've worked with that school for 8 years, and their vision matches our agreed syllabus vision as well. Brilliant. So that's good news, isn't it? The next thing that I've included is deep dives by Ofsted into religious education. Now, this is not anything to do with swimming. This is to do with the fact that when an Ofsted inspector goes into school, they have a negotiated discussion with the head teacher about what subjects they might look at in great depth. They can't look at all subjects because there are just too many in the national curriculum and obviously within SMSE, spiritual, knowledge, social and cultural. So we've looked at some deep dives by Ofsted, I have anyway, and they have created a bar chart. And when I've looked at that bar chart, actually they've only perhaps done 6 or 7 deep dives in religious education as opposed to 30 or 40 into English or maths. So it is not high profile. But I do know that there has been a discussion just this week in the House of Lords. There has been a debate on the quality of religious education. And we feel that there may, as a result, be more deep dives now from Ofsted. So watch this space. The next section is...
Can we just...
Yes?
What I'd like... in terms of the sequence here, is to have attendance at various meetings by the advisor next. And I'd like just to say a little bit more about the website, and then we have the blasphemy in schools to finish with, if that's all right.
So attendance at various meetings by myself. I don't just attend these meetings. I also attend meetings to do with associations, to do with religious education and religious studies. And some are local meetings, but they are mostly national meetings. And I attend those meetings on your behalf, and I gather information and think what it is you as Sacre would want to hear from those meetings. So you can see that I've attended meetings, I've listed them there. One of them in particular was a meeting that we discussed last time at this meeting, where I asked for you to tell me what you thought about our Sacre and the lovely things we were actually doing. And then I was to go the next day to the meeting, the RE Hub meeting, and to explain everything about Staffordshire Sacre. There were a number of Sacres on that meeting. Unfortunately, perhaps, the meeting was hijacked by the new chair of the National Associations of Sacre, and we were only given about 2 minutes to talk about our own Sacres.
Who was that?
I have forgotten.
Was it Bill Moore?
Yes, and it wasn't Bill. No, it wasn't Bill. I know Bill. It was another gentleman.
You sure it was chair of Sacre?
Chair of Nassaka.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the gentleman we voted for at
as vice chair.
Okay.
To be vice chair, yes.
He seems to be calling himself chair? Okay, well, this gentleman from Nassaka decided to give us a whole history about his life within the RE world, which was interesting, but he didn't give us the opportunity to do the job that we were supposed to do. So we had an apology from Chris Giles the next day to say when we have our next meeting, we will discuss that. So that's fine. I've also attended various other meetings, as you can see there, and I've also met with a HLTA, which is a higher level teaching assistant from Chadsmead Primary School in Lichfield called Sarah Dennis, who's very interested in Sacre and very interested in the work that we carry out. And she wants to train lots of schools with regard to religious education. And it's lovely, but I've had to just rein her in a little bit, because some of the things she was actually training on were to do with the previous agreed syllabus, which is fine. But so I've been meeting with her to say, if you train, let me know, show me what you're going to talk about, and I'll give you my blessing or I'll tweak it. So that's where we're at with that at the moment.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the website because I think I've rather cut across you and you didn't finish what you were going to say about that, and perhaps plans for the next Sacre meeting.
Yeah. So with regard to the Sacre website, we are very indebted to our clerks over here who've been working away in the background. And they have been putting together a website for us. So I may as well hand over, actually, to yourselves. Tell us what you've been doing.
So I'll speak, but Joe's done all the work. I'd like that for the record. So we've, on the request of the Sacre at the last meeting, Joe has spent some time working with our digital team to come up with a page dedicated to Sacre, because we do have a committee page and there is information on the committee page and the members of the committee are listed there. But there isn't specific information about Sacre itself, what it does, what it stands for, the agreed syllabus, teaching resources. So Joe has worked, I'm really sorry, I'm going to keep saying that. Joe's worked to get this developed. We've got documents that we would send out to new members, so we've tried to take that information and squeeze it down into just a few pages of information on the website, which we've done. We've sent it to Mary and Michael to have a look at, and there's a few comments that have been made which we will be able to address, no problem. Also, we're going to utilise it, as we've discovered today, in terms of our vacancies, to see if we can try and let people know that we've got some spaces available if they are interested. We've also linked into Entrust's website as well, because all of the teaching resources and the agreed syllabus are there. So rather than double stacking it, so we have the information in it somewhere else as well, there is a link from our website to Entrust. Or you can obviously just access Entrust to get that information. Might be worth a conversation to see if perhaps they can link back to us if there's people want to have some information about Sacre. But it took a while. There was a bit of backwards and forwards, but Joe did a lot of good work with our digital team. So if there are changes that need to be made, Joe's actually got the permissions to be able to make those tweaks and changes so we can keep it as up to date as possible moving forward.
I think we were aware that other local authorities do have a Sacre website, and it seems a very good positive development, part of accountability, transparency and everything.
So when I train the chairs of governors and governors of schools, of about 300 of them in the summer term, they will all receive that information about the Sacre website. And perhaps if we know exactly what vacancies we have at that point exactly, I can put a little paragraph in if anybody's interested. Please contact, and so on. And with regard to the Entrust website, I have written that. That has, that's very new as well for Entrust. And on there, as we've said, would be the agreed syllabus. Do you want to wave the agreed syllabus around? The agreed syllabus, and the resources. So far I've put on early years resources, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and I've put on a long-term plan for middle schools, and currently I'm working on what resources I could add for our high schools and secondary schools. So that's where I'm at with that at the moment. And now that we have the Sacre website name, I can now add that to that section as well. So it's all working it's unbelievable that it's all working side by side. So that's really good news. And can I say thank you very much for being so proactive and helpful. It's been it's been great, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we come to the last item under the key issues, and that's to do with a document called Blasphemy in Schools, Self-Censorship and Security Fears Amongst British Teachers. I don't know if anybody's had the opportunity to read this. We have a few people nodding. And if you've had the opportunity to read it, would you like to make any comments before Michael perhaps makes a comment or I make a comment?
I think it's quite a balanced paper myself, and sets out a lot of the issues that are current in religious education in schools, and I think I'll best leave it at that because it is a topic that, if I delve into it, I'm not the expert, but there are quite a few things that people jump to a conclusion, and that is not the fact. And they think that by doing something it's wrong. So I thought it was a balanced report, and considering Nadine Zahari and his history of coming here as a refugee from Iraq when he was about 5 or 6, and he'll tell you about persecution if you want to hear the word, and so I thought that in itself. Amongst many things, the policy exchange may not be everybody's cup of tea in some of the papers that they write, but I thought it was a balanced report, and the law is quite often there, and it might just, some of the comments in it might help our teachers and teaching staff. That's what I thought.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I don't think we have tried to find out if any teachers within our own county are feeling that they require to modify the way they teach for fear of possible community reaction. For me, the sort of heart of the report were the quotes that I've got on page 38 and 39. Suella Braverman said when she was Home Secretary, the education sector and police have a duty to prioritise the physical safety of children over the hurt feelings of adults. I think that's a very important principle. We're looking at schools, we're looking at vulnerable children, and they are more important, and their well-being is more important than what adults might be feeling outside. That's our concern here. Schools answer to pupils and parents. They do not have to answer to self-appointed community activists. And one of the features of the incidents that have been described here is the way in which outside activists have stirred up what can only be called a sort of mob reaction, a mob feeling. And once that happens, emotions get out of control, people get out of control, and you hear lives being threatened and lives being ruined by the consequences of all this. And it has happened in places in this country. We know that issues of blasphemy have caused difficulties in other European countries, and even more so in some countries further afield, where there is a very real risk of people being hounded to death by a mob if there's any hint of any blasphemous action or words having taken place. And we do not want to see this happening in this country. But it's a very careful line that has to be drawn between protecting freedom of speech and protecting individual pupils and and schools on the one hand, and ensuring that people's natural feelings are not inflamed unduly and improperly by people being very unwise or very foolish in the way they go about their teaching or other activities. One can't help feeling that knowing the history of the situation, to show any picture of Muhammad in a classroom would be potentially inflammatory. And one has to say that one has to do that very carefully, although the point is made in the report that Muslims themselves need to be aware of diversity within Islam. It is the case that the great majority of Muslims in this country would be offended at any attempt to depict Muhammad in any kind of visual form at all. And how far that should affect the way a teacher presents material in religious education or other studies, I think is something that needs very careful guidance about. And another feature of this report is that although Suella Braverman promised guidance, she and her successors have now passed the buck, it seems, onto the ministry or the cabinet minister for levelling up families and communities, or whatever the actual title is now. So there is an area here of ongoing concern within government and within the wider community, and we are, I'm sure, wanting to ensure that teachers in our own schools are protected with proper advice, and also do not find themselves encouraged to be inflammatory in the wrong kind of way in the classroom. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder if there's any correlation between the fact that religious education perhaps isn't being taught in schools at the level we want, because of the fact that perhaps teachers are afraid of some of the language they can use, and maybe that's one of the reasons where they perhaps shy away from it rather than sort of, dealing with it and actually having those conversations. So I just wonder whether that would put potential teachers off or schools off from actually going down that sort of avenue in religious education studies.
I think that's actually a very good comment to make regarding this. Or it's self-censorship. I won't mention any words to do with anything that might be inflammatory, and therefore when I teach I may not be teaching a balanced viewpoint because I'm afraid to use certain words or certain terminology. And this is why we value the workshops that we run, because during those workshops HIFSA is able to explain the words that are used appropriately. And from what I've heard, the teachers have also found it very, very useful to see the words and to hear the words that are acceptable, and for her to have a quiet word to say, we would not say that. That is not acceptable. But, as Michael has said, there are degrees of Christianity and there are degrees of Islam. We need to be aware of that.
I think there's two things that in the paper, actually. One is that nobody has the right not to be offended. And we haven't had a blasphemy law in this country for donkey's years. So that opens up all sorts of things with recent demonstrations about Gaza. And I was reading somewhere the other day, something that in COVID lockdown and everything else, a lot of people had pets and had a dog. And they take them around, and I can't help but notice when I go to the pub that there seems to be no end of people turn up with a dog. But in certain cultures, dogs are dirty, and they don't like them. Certainly not near food. Licking the plate would be absolute no-no. And that goes with certain religions. There's other places where they're very tasty and they like to eat them. But, I'm not going to get into that because that could offend somebody, but then that's me being polite. And that's one of the problems. And I do think the comment that was made by Mark Wilcox about will this deter people from teaching religious education? If I was doing a risk register and the risk of upsetting somebody and you thought, oh dear, this might not, it drops off the agenda, rather than what Suella Braverman and Adeem Zahari have done is confront it and say, come on, let's just think about this and let's discuss it in an orderly manner. You know, it'd be interesting to see how things turn out in Northern Ireland, because they're being pragmatic, that they've got to get on with ruling that province. I use the word province because that's what it is. I know Irish politics.
Yes, you picked up the second quote on that page, Councillor, which we might have moved on to. No one has a right not to be offended, and so forth. I have to say, I'm very conscious that I do censor myself, and have censored myself when teaching, but not necessarily out of fear, but because I know that I may have attitudes and dispositions which won't be helpful and constructive in that situation. And when you use the phrase a balanced presentation, there's a question as who's doing the judgment as to what is balanced. One person might think a balanced presentation is one thing, and somebody else might think it differently. I mean, I think the BBC has quite a lot of difficulty in justifying what it claims to be balanced, doesn't it? But perhaps we shan't go down that road. But this is a very serious study here of some of the undercurrents that are going on in our society, and which we have to prepare our pupils for. This is a country where people do have strongly held views and may be prone to be offended in certain ways. I have to say that within Christian circles, many Christians are offended by certain things that happen and are said. And there are one or two ways in which in our society these have some sort of check on them, but these checks are getting weaker, and people feel more and more able to say very hurtful things, which to a Christian would be very extremely upsetting. There is a right of protest, there is a right of free speech, but I think it doesn't operate equally across the whole community in this way. We can only prepare our... Yeah, Maddie, go on.
There we go. Okay, just to press. Okay, I just wanted to make a comment as well that I think it's worth bearing in mind that certainly in a lot of our secondary schools, obviously we know that the people that are teaching RE are not necessarily specialists, and so with this report in mind, I think it also highlights the importance of the work of people like Mary and this committee to support our staff, and certainly to be able to give them the tools that they need to know what is safe to say and what is not safe to say. And so, yes, there's a fear there, but there's also just a genuine not knowing, because they're not specialists, they haven't done the training, they haven't necessarily got the history of the knowledge of RE. And I think it's also where, with regards to what you're saying as well, Michael, in terms of in Christianity, I know when I go into high schools, because part of my job is to deliver workshops on Christianity, I do talk about the spectrum that there is in Christianity, and I often try and include Q&As at the end that the students can then ask. And I always say to them, you cannot offend me. I've been doing this job for however many years. No one's offended me with a question. And I do think that RE is an important subject that is not necessarily highlighted in reports like this, because they have to be so political and correct. But it is so important that we give young people and children the space that they can explore these things. And so I guess this also comes with a bit of a plea to the committee to please do keep on funding things like the West Hill Legacy Project, because it's important that especially in somewhere like Staffordshire where there's not as much diversity, that our children and young people are given the opportunity to ask these questions and to come up against issues like this. It's tricky, but it's important that we do it.
Thank you for saying that, Maddie. And it occurs to me there's another theme in the report, is the failure of senior management to support and protect their teaching staff when issues like this arise. And I think that... Do you want to say anything about that, Mary?
And when we come on to that section in the agenda, you will see that I have been awarded a charity grant to train trustees, members and governors within schools on how to strategically address difference, diversity, equity, inclusion through, it's got to be, and I have to have the words, through religious education or religious studies, or I couldn't have got the grant. When I come to that section, I'll explain how we're going about that. So, Maddie, that matches exactly what you've been talking about, doesn't it? Because if the people at the top tier don't understand these things, then how can they possibly help and support those who are supposed to be at the chalk face, or is it the whiteboard face now, supporting and teaching our children? So that is our next massive project here from Sacre. Wish me luck.
Thank you, everyone, for the contributions on this. This is obviously quite a sensitive and quite an important area here. Fortunately, no incidents of this kind have occurred in Staffordshire, but that doesn't mean to say that they couldn't. And we need to be prepared, we need to be alert, and we need to ensure that our schools, our staff, our governors, our pupils are fully able to respond authentically and constructively whenever situations of considerable heat and upset might occur. So thank you, Mary, for that. A serious matter. We move on to item 7, the update on Nassika. Mary and I had this conversation just a moment ago about who was chair of Nassika. I can say a little bit about that, which is that the chair of Nassika at last year's AGM was Linda Rudge, but since she was appointed or elected as chair, she has announced that she wished to withdraw from being chair of Nassika because of pressure of other activities. And the person who was elected as vice chair, whose name escapes me at the moment, but has become the acting chair for the time being. And I think what has happened is that Linda has been persuaded to come back as chair at the next AGM, providing that she is given adequate support in carrying out the increasing burden of responsibility that the chair of Nassika has to carry. And that form of support is going to be in the form of an executive officer who will be paid an honorarium or a fee to support the work of Nassika and take some of the load off the chair. So that, I think that's what's likely to be the case, Mary.
Yeah.
It was a gentleman who was...
Yeah.
So that's going on at the moment. Alongside this, Nassika has been doing considerable amount of work in partnership with the network of hubs, RE hubs across the country. And these are going ahead very well, in spite of the experience that you had, Mary. They are very constructive ways forward, and they do actually suggest part of the future for SACRAs within the country, I think, because as schools become more and more academised, the role of SACRA will begin to, well, it already has to some extent, begin to shift and to adjust to the new situation. And the working together with RE hubs is part of that future, I think. For those of you who are interested in such details, I still have all the means of making payments for NASICA, even though I was supposed to stop being treasurer 2 years ago. NASICA can't pay anybody online at the moment or with a cheque unless I do it. The reason is that they've been trying to create a constitution for themselves which will enable them to be registered in a formal way within the sort of structure of companies across the country. And they're going to become fairly soon a CIO, which I think is a community interest organisation. But in order to do this, they need to formalise themselves, and in doing so, they will change their bank account. And when they change their bank account, I will cease to have anything to do with the money. Hopefully that might happen within the next few months. It will mean that it will put NASICA in the position of being able to apply more properly for grants and for recognition, and to be able to do other things. I remember right in the early days of NASICA, there were a fairly large number of local authorities who wondered what on earth they were doing, paying subscription fees to this body which had no legal status at all, annual subscriptions. And fortunately, they overcame their very proper scruples about what they did with public money, and NASICA was able to survive with the annual subscriptions of those that were prepared not to look too closely into the status of NASICA at a formal level. So that's Staffordshire have paid their dues already, so you can't take those back. But I now understand why local authorities did have scruples as to why they should pay money to NASICA. One of this was Birmingham, I remember, and some of the bigger ones who had a very strong sense of being stewards of public money and where this public money went to. So we hope that they feel that although it wasn't totally regular, it was worth it. And they got some value for the money that they gave. It wasn't all that much money, but it was public money, and it still is. So that's really what's going on in NASICA at the moment. I'm quite happy to answer any questions if people have got them. My own role in NASICA quite clearly is going to disappear, so I'm not going to be able to give reports on what's happening in NASICA. Can I recommend that people do look up the NASICA website regularly, because it does have events, it does have advice, it does have information, and it's really quite a good wealth of material for any SACRE.
And you can see on page 71 that we have login details for NASICA. And you can log in, and there are free webinars. Because we've paid our subscription, you're entitled, if you wish, to join a webinar to find out information about, there may be one about the blasphemy paper, there may be one about the House of Lords debate on the quality of religious education. So you are able to access those. And we have also notification of a NASICA conference in York in May. And we do say if anybody wants to go from this SACRE, then to let us know, because we have to apply for that position and we have to pay. So as soon as we know, then I get sent an invoice, which I send then on to Staffordshire County Council. In the past, Michael has attended and I have attended, but that doesn't mean to say that's the way it should go in the future. I find the conferences very uplifting. I enjoy the networking. And I know that it's possible that if I was to attend this conference, that I would have the opportunity perhaps to speak about the project that we will be initiating in the very near future. Or it might be that I talk about that at a future conference, just depending on, time and everything. So if anybody does wish to attend the NASCA conference, could they let Joe know in plenty of time so that we can put your name forward? It is a whole day, so you would have to find yourself some accommodation, and it is in York, and there are travel, etc. We can help with that, can't we?
Mary says overnight accommodation. Certainly some of the Nassau executive will be staying overnight, but when I went to the one at York, it only took about 2 hours by car. So it's not that desperate a journey if you're prepared to do it. So you can do it within the day. And I have to say, obviously these places are paid for by your Sacre, so we would have to find the travel fare as well.
Yeah.
In the past, these conferences have operated on the basis that if one of your representatives from a Sacre was an officer of NASICA, the National Association, they got one of their places, at least one of the local, the Sacre would have a free place, and would only pay for their second representative. But I think now it will be 2 representatives to be paid for, and unless they're actually doing some presenting or have a role and get a free place. So, I think it was 120 for the cost, and then the cost of travel on top. So it's not a sort of pennies thing.
So just to reiterate, if anyone wants to go, let us know as soon as possible. Perhaps we'd say within 10 days of this meeting, let's put a cut-off date, because we then have to apply. Thank you.
Perhaps we should say this in an email to everyone, since there are quite a lot of people not here today. Okay, we move on to item 8, and this really is another feather in our Sacre's cap, but it's all due to Mary's initiative and really hard work. So Mary's going to tell us a little bit about the latest development.
As you can see on page 73, I've tried to outline what it is that I've been up to. And what has happened is I noticed that there were grants available from a charity called the Culham St Gabriel charity, and they were available to Sacres or schools, provided you had a safeguarding policy, provided that you were able to put together a paper of so many thousand words, and you would look at their website and their vision, and that your Sacre vision was in line with their vision. So I did all that research. I had 2 interviews with the CEO of Culham St Gabriel, and the project that I put forward on behalf of yourselves is outlined in 4.1. I called the project a Seed Cord funded initiative, and it was about seeking assurances from head teachers from trustees and governors that the richness of human diversity, worldviews, including different RE curricular content, pedagogy and provision, is at the heart of their organisation. So that's what we went for. And they said they'd never had anything like this before, not a suggestion to work with governors and trustees, because they'd always worked with teachers. And my way of putting it was that actually you need to sometimes go to the level above in order to ensure that it filters to the level just below them. So we were successful as a Sacre, and they awarded us, I did ask for £10,000, don't ask, don't get. So we were awarded £6,500, and on page 74 you can see how those costings would actually pan out. And so a report so far. So what have I done? I have met with at least 12 schools face-to-face to talk about the project, to advertise it. I've been on 5 webinars and advertised it, of which I would say, if I count up, there must have been 200 people in total that I've spoken to about this project already. And I've also spoken to the clerks who clock meetings of trustees and of governors and local governing boards to flag it up for them. And then in a document called the Governor Information Pack, which is, I know it's a service level agreement that schools have to have with governor services at interest. I have put into that document all the information about this grant, and that there is a possibility that schools could join with me to have discussions about their strategic intentions with regard to equality, equity, diversity, inclusion, and the agreed syllabus. Even if it wasn't ours, it could be their theirs, it's an agreed syllabus, and so on. I had a meeting last night with the CEO, and I think she was rather surprised that we'd made so many inroads already. And what happens next is that I'm writing the webinar for people to join, 23 people initially, because we want to keep it small in the first instance, because I need to modify the content according to how people actually respond. And in it will be areas that we've just been looked at with regard to that blasphemy paper. And I'm pleased to say that Hifsa, who isn't here today, but she is a Muslim and is very well, she's experienced training. She actually does the Prevent Agenda training for the DFE. So I know I've got somebody with me that we can both together present this for everybody. And we're also aiming to roll out 6 of these webinars between now and next January, and also some face-to-face meetings as well. I've got a couple of schools interested in us going to talk to the whole of their trustee boards about these aspects. So I spoke, as I said, to the CEO last night, and she's very pleased of the inroads that we're making already, and I look forward to the first webinar, which we're running on February the 28th rather, and then we run the second one on March the 19th. And then, depending on how those go, we will modify the materials. I will advertise them once again for the summer term in the Government Information Packs, and I run all of those webinars that match the Government Information Pack. So I make sure that we talk about Sacre, we make sure that we talk about religious education. So that's where we're at currently. I don't know if there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mary. I can comment that the trust that Mary's in touch with, the Culham St Gabriel Trust, is the major voluntary funder of RE in the country. And it funds some very significant parts of the RE world. At the moment, it's obviously got money, but it tries to use its money wisely and constructively, and we're very pleased that we've managed to make this progress.
When I spoke to the CEO last night, she did indicate that there would be a conference for something called ARIAC, which is the Association for Religious Education Inspectors and Associates. And there's a possibility that they would want me to run during that conference a workshop on the work that we've been doing. But I only found that out last night, so I'm just doing a bit of exploratory work on that. And that's in June. So if I did do that, then I would be able to report about that in the November meeting. But as I say, it's early days, but I was very pleased that they flagged that up to me.
Well, it's well done to Mary for this enormously hard work that she's done. And it will bring benefits, I'm sure, to the way in which the management teams approach their work and the kind of culture that they develop within their schools. Developing a sensitivity to diversity and an appropriate response to it lies at the heart of our RE agreed syllabus. And this is really a kind of parallel development at the governance level, which is all to the good. They're two sides of the same coin in a way.
I think I'm fortunate that I've been working with the governors of our schools for the past 12 years, delivering all their training, writing all their training packages, because with a subject such as this, which can be quite delicate, I think there first of all has to be trust. And whereas I know they don't know Hifsa, they do know me, and I think they would think, well, Mary will speak common sense. It's not going to be one of those woke type webinars, you know, telling everybody off for using incorrect terminology. It's not going to be like that at all. It's going to give them facts, it's going to give them information, and it's going to give them confidence to address these issues. And that's the aim of it. It's not to wield a big stick and inform people they must do these things. It's guiding them, supporting them, nurturing them, and coaching them.
I was going to ask Mary, are we being completely inclusive here in terms of academies as well as schools within the county's orbit?
Yes, absolutely, because within the service level agreements that the schools have with Entrust, there are now more academies than there are maintained schools accessing the information. The work I do saves those academies and the local authority a lot of time, because I do all of their research into what it is schools must, not should or could, must address for each term. It's strategically, not operationally, because a lot of people like to get involved with driving a minibus, that type of thing. This is more the strategic level of governance. So yeah, we have more academies now than maintained schools. So.
Well, Mary has promised, I'll use that word rather than threatened, to give further updates as this safeguarding policy develops.
And I thought perhaps might be a good idea at the next meeting, if you're all in agreement in June, is that, as Michael has referenced the website, we could show you the website and how that's developed. We could look at the Entrust website as well. And Hifsa, who will be here at the meeting, and we could do a summary of that webinar that we will have put together and just pull out the salient points so that you know where we all are. Because again, it's all right us training our trustees and governors, but in actual fact, I suppose we are the next level even above them. And if we don't understand equity, equality, diversity and inclusion, it's a remiss of us, I think. So if we could, if you're happy, we could do a summary of that and just have those 2 items as the main items for the next meeting.
Well done, Mary, again, and thank you very, very much indeed for all that. Now, you may or may not have noticed that we're going to do something ourselves at this point. So, Mary, would you like to introduce?
Yes, we've got a bit of an interactive session, and you can see on page 78, and if somebody hasn't got page 78, they can have a look at mine. This is to see your level of understanding of equality, equity, diversity and inclusion. To see what do you know about these things. And you know, it's absolute. This is a safe space. Isn't that what we use those words, Maddie, don't we, in school? This is a safe space. You are allowed to say, I don't know anything. It's allowed. It's absolutely allowed. It's not a problem whatsoever. And I was wondering whether you could perhaps in groups of 2 or 3 have a look at some of the questions that I put on page 78. The first one, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being very low and 5 very high, how would you rate your current knowledge? Do you know what policies organisations have to have in order to promote equality, equity, diversity and inclusion? And you're allowed to say no. If you say yes, I might say, well, list a few. How often do you think these things are discussed in school settings? So you may not have knowledge about that, but you might think, I don't know, but you might know. What do you think are the main challenges? And how do you stay personally informed with these aspects? And are there any specific areas that you want help with? So I wondered whether we could have a few minutes together discussing that and have some feedback. Does anybody not have a copy of the page? Okay, I'll share mine with you if you're happy to.
Can I just say on this one?
Yes, sorry.
As councillors, We have had training sessions on this, but I'm not going to be open to what we might come up with when it comes to this scenario. Because it's been a while now since we've had these training sessions on this subject. So it'll be interesting to see the outcome.
Have you given them a copy? Thank you.
Can I ask whether the councillors want to mingle with other members or whether they want to group themselves together?
Gabby's going
Okay.
We got about 2 more minutes and then we'll come together. 2 more minutes.
Well, it seems as if everybody was talking quite freely on that one. Perhaps we'll go around the different groups and see how you found that exercise. And perhaps Mary would like to.
Right, so we're going to have, I think we've got 4 groups. We've got 4 groups. We're not going to go through every single one for every single group, but I think it's going to be important to actually discuss some of the aspects that you might have come up with. So when we looked on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being very low and 5 being very high, in your groups, what was your overall numbers? Was it 4s and 5s? Or?
Yeah, 4 for both of us, yeah.
2 and 3, 3 and 4.
Yeah, we were sort of 2 and 3, 3 and 4.
We were anything from 2 to 5, which is fine. Well, perhaps I was.
4.5.
Now, the next one asks for some specific examples. It says, do you know which policies, organisations such as schools, because we are dealing with schools here, aren't we, need in order to promote equality, equity, diversity and inclusion? So just show of hands if you said, do you know which policies are needed? Okay. So though, if you don't, it's absolutely fine. So if we go around, each of us, perhaps to shout out a policy, would that be appropriate? So we'll start, and we said there needs to be a policy about equality, the Equality Act of 2010, and the 9 protected characteristics.
We said the Disability Equality Scheme.
We talked about the SEND policies that are needed in schools.
Then we talked about anti-bullying policy.
Safeguarding policy.
We've got data protection.
We put safeguarding as well, but you'd already said safeguarding as well.
Then we talked about the Public Sector Duty Act. I don't know if you know about that one. All schools have to have a Public Sector Duty Act. Policy, yeah.
Equal opportunities, equality of opportunity.
Food Act.
Yeah, because food standards is about provision for pupils in school with regard to their dietary needs. So it is part of inclusion, isn't it? And the Food Standards Act is an important act.
We've got sexual harassment, thinking about what came up in Keeping Children Safe in Education a few years ago. Lots of schools had to rewrite those policies.
Then we mentioned the RHSE policy, Relationship, Health, Sex Education Policy, which is a statutory, that means law. They have to have a policy of this nature in school addressing relationships within schools. Anybody else with anything else that we perhaps haven't mentioned?
Yeah, there's all the subject policies in school have reference to those particular aspects, particularly inclusion and how children's needs are met through in that subject.
So how often do you think equality, equity, diversity and inclusion topics are discussed in school settings? We said frequently. So we all agree with the frequently. And we also said they should always be discussed, shouldn't they? The next one, in your opinion, what are the main challenges faced in promoting equality, equity, diversity and inclusion? So we'll ask Maddie's group. Do you want to just say a few words there?
So we talked about safety being an issue of like different groups and different people feeling safe to be part of communities. We talked about the fact that it's an ever-changing beast. So there's always, I would even say, you know, can anyone ever mark themselves as a 5 at the top score, because there's always more to learn. And then we talked a little bit about numbers in terms of asylum seekers and so on coming through. That can be often a challenge in terms of just teachers and other people in the community being aware of what their community looks like and what their different cultures are that they're facing.
Councillors?
Demographics. Such as
Yeah, home life.
Yeah, home life.
And our lovely Catholic colleagues?
I think entrenched attitudes sometimes of some families where children perhaps haven't had I suppose, diverse opportunities to get to know people from different cultures and faiths.
And we also talked about conflict, which is what we've been talking about, drawing people out of their comfort zones when talking about things that they're not used to. I think in school we call it, don't we, Maddie, the cultural capital. A child arrives in school with the backpack of life that they have, but they only know about their own backpack. And schools have a duty to increase the amount that's in that backpack, which through life experiences. So, okay. How do you personally stay informed? How do you stay informed? So our Catholic colleagues, would you like to tell us how you stay informed?
It's regular staff training, really, within the schools. And I think, again, I'm lucky enough to be a governor within a school as well. So the governor information pack as well. There's a lot of information coming in. Yes, I've read that, yeah.
Councillors, how do you stay informed? Oh, you're very busy people, I know that.
Yeah, we get regular sort of briefings and training around these sort of areas, and they appear in a lot of the papers that we deal with. So we do have that part of the section of the papers that deals with equality, diversity, that sort of with the workforce, etc. Yeah.
And if you're unfortunate to be involved with pensions, you get even more training.
I have to say that having sat on the Education Committee and then the Scrutiny Committee, this principle of having a reference to inclusiveness at every item on the agendas of every committee, I think is a very good discipline. I don't know whether it's done in every local authority, but credit to Staffordshire.
Anything you want to add in your group?
Just to be stereotypical, social media.
Yeah.
That's what we said.
We said social media.
Yeah, I've worked with asylum seekers quite frequently recently, and they came with very challenging questions. I mean, just last night I talked to somebody and said, if you want to get married, what do you have to do? And do you have to talk to the parents? Do they have got to give the permission? Or how do you do it? So just things like that. Or talking about he's a Muslim. Do you believe in Christ? Is Christ the Son of God? Is he, has he written the Bible? How do you get the information from the Bible? So we get really challenging questions. But also children, grandchildren.
I was going to say I always love to actually ask the young people as well, and so find out from them what is the issue for them, what is the stuff that they're currently talking about that they're finding difficult or that they think of. And I do think that our children and young people have such, especially after post-COVID, their cultural capital is quite small because their world was so confined for a while, and so it is good to ask them.
Grandchildren certainly put you right as an adult. They do, believe you me.
And then the final question, just open this up to the floor. Are there specific areas where you feel you need additional training or support? Does anybody just want to say anything there?
Hi, I think for us coming from a Catholic schools background as well, the diversity part really, because again we do an awful lot on the Catholic faith, but it's almost very lightly touched upon with other faiths.
Else wants to just add something there? In our group we said we welcome any training on any aspect to update us, because we might have historical thoughts and feelings and things move on, like the Prevent agenda, which has only just changed on January the 4th, and everybody's going, has it? I didn't know that. You know, but it is being updated, isn't it? And our Catholic colleagues, if you want to access our diversity workshops, you've got my email, you just ask me and I will see what I can do.
I think just to cast a stone in the water and the paper on blasphemy, I'm just wondering how far the common law has been pushed back by regulations and things like that. Because when you look at the recommendations in the paper at the end, they're all pretty common sense. They're not outrageous. And I'd pose the question: could we, as a Sacre, recommend them to schools when they're worried about things, instead of waiting for government to come down with some decree and regulation from above that this is what you should be doing? You know, because we are a democratic country that relies on common sense and common law. So sometimes we end up with training for the sake of, I know we sort of suffer it. We end up with training for the sake of training, so that we can tick boxes and say that we've been trained.
I always say reminders are really good. I forget things, I don't know about you. I go to a course, I think that's great. Then I go somewhere else, and I've forgotten it, but it's just slipped down the agenda a bit in my brain. Then I go to another training, I think, oh yes, I remember that bit. And I suppose what happens is over time, it's the drip feed, and it makes you more aware of these aspects. But I do agree with you, sometimes training for the sake of training absolutely turns people off and doesn't actually enable them. Yeah, so.
And if I could just add in terms of what we might offer to schools, since we know that the government have accepted that there is a need for advice and have promised that this advice will be forthcoming, that we wait for that to materialise, at least in the short term, and rather than send advice to our schools, which could be challenged, shall I say, or could be the focus of difficulty if an incident should arise. As people might then say, what is its status, and so forth. Yeah, Maddie.
Can I just ask, sorry, just to make it abundantly clear in my mind, presumably because the grant received, Mary, the workshops and things, the webinars for schools and governors that you're offering, are they free at cost to those organisations? Yeah, so in a way that's what we are doing to offer schools more understanding.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock and at the agenda. We have a little bit more work to do. And agenda item 10 is the quite important report on the standards in GCSE and A-level in schools within the county. Mary, could you just go through the headlines here?
Yes. As you know, schools undertake GCSE examinations in religious education, but they call it religious studies in high schools, and at A-level it's the same. And what I've done here is I've taken the data from 2022 and 2023, and in some instances on page 83 I've gone back to 2019 with some of the data with regard to GCSE results. And the reason for that is because in the interim years when we had COVID, there were different methods of marking GCSE and A-level results. So I have tried to, yes, give you the full historical data, but in my mind, it's the comparison for GCSEs between 2019 and 2023 are really the proper comparisons, because one of them was teacher assessed grade, one was central assessed grade, and the other one was take anything you like into the exam that might help you with the exam. You know, so this year, 2023, it was more like 2019. And if you look at those, data shows a stabilising of results back to pre-pandemic levels. You can see in 2019, the average grade of 9 to 4 was 72.3% in the nation, but 65.9 in Staffordshire, and now we're at 66.1 in Staffordshire and 72.6 in the nation. So we've gone back to where we were, and so this is a much better data set to start making comparisons from. There's been a fall in numbers of pupils undertaking religious studies at GCSE nationwide, but in Staffordshire there has been an increase, which is good, and that could be to do with the fact that we are raising the profile of religious education in Staffordshire. It is slowly, drip, drip, feed. Then on page 84, what I've done is I've taken out a few names of schools that have very high amount of entries and their grades and where they are higher than the national. And it's interesting to note that, you know, our Catholic schools are doing very well with regard to GCSE results. But the best school so far in the county with regard to our to do with religious education, religious studies, is John Taylor High School. So closely followed by Thomas Lane's, then Paisley. I know everybody thinks Paisley is the highest, but actually I've been through all of the figures for all of it, and it's interesting, isn't it, to see those numbers. Then underneath that on page 84, I've actually tried to tell you how many pupils actually went in for the examinations, because one school could put one pupil in, they could get one pupil at A star, and they would have 100%. So I've tried to include those that did have a, you know, quite a high percentage of entries compared to the number on roll for that year group. So John Taylor High was 246, and I think they were only 248 in the year group. So that's amazing, isn't it? Mm. So those schools there have done extremely well indeed. And I've tried, as I said, on page 84 to clarify that a little bit for you. There are some drops in some schools, there are increases in others. And the difficulty is some schools in 2019 were maintained schools, now they're part of academy change. So always trying to compare like with like is really, really difficult. But all in all, I'd say we are holding our own, and I think it's a pat on the back for those schools during very difficult circumstances have kept the status quo. Status quo is not acceptable, I know that, but at this point after COVID, I think to get back to a situation where we are, I think it's admirable. And then for the A-level results, we have had an increase in the amount of entries. In Staffordshire in 2022, we just had 164, but this year we've had 226. So that's good news. So I know it's not a vast increase, but the national entries went down, but Staffordshire went up. And you can see the average grade is B, which is fine because the average national grade is a B, and we're getting there. Staffordshire, the A stars to A, you can see it's not as high as in 2022, but actually for the national it's not as high as in 2022. And if you look at the difference between the national in 2022 and the national in 2023 and Staffordshire in both, you can see that they've dropped by a similar amount because the examination was not a similar examination. Now you might say, well, why haven't we compared this to the 2019 results? And the reason for that is in Staffordshire, the A-level results for 2019 were not a stable data set. I wasn't provided with the correct information. I was only provided with schools who were maintained schools and not academy schools. So I couldn't compare that one. But as you can see, we are holding our own. And once again, I have noted those schools where they entered quite a number of candidates and where they achieved so many A stars to A. And once again, John Taylor High School comes out, King Edward VI comes out, Blessed William Howard, and Newcastle and Stafford colleges, and so on. There is an increase in the entry, but we have got to think about how we can still improve on that data. Is that okay for a summary?
Yeah, fine. We do allow questions or comments if people would like to. Obviously, this is one of the key metrics that we have, although it doesn't include all pupils. It does give some idea of the vitality of the subject within a school and how much response there is from pupils to it as well.
Yeah. And when I receive these results from the county, it involves all of these pages with all of the results in. So it does take a while to go through it, but it's really interesting then to come out with a summary of that nature. This summary will go into next year's annual report. And I am pleased to say Paisley is in there.
So what is hopefully a relatively brief item, the Sacre budget for this current year and on into next year.
I haven't been given the figures for next year. I have asked, and all I received was the assurances that it would not be less than this year. So I worked on that one. I have emailed them 3 times in the past month, and I've been told it's being discussed, but it will not be less, so that's good. So you can see from the budget here, this year we're not going to have any money left over, because in previous years we seem to have had thousands left over and we couldn't work out why. So this year, using and utilising every workshop, which I now have complete control over, I no longer have to go to interest to ask for provision, to provide how much will it cost, which takes about 6 weeks to even get an answer. That's okay. We're now live, if you like it. Every piece of information is a live piece of information. So going forward, you can see we've got actually possibly with thinking about the workshops to come before April, we may even be £638 overdrawn, unheard of for our Sacre, but because we get the Cullum St Gabriel grant, which can be carried forward, then I'll offset it with that to begin with, and when the new budget comes in, I'll just readjust it. Also, we may be having some workshops to do with Christianity as well, and I'd like to think that coming, you know, as the new budget comes forward, that we could use some of that money to support YouthNet in giving an equal distribution of workshops to balance out Islam and Christianity. So that's where we are going forward. And Sam, I've been in contact with Sam Phillips, who runs YouthNet, and she explained to me that they had no capacity till the summer term. So now that we have the capacity in the room, it means that all of this now is absolutely in-house. So we have complete and utter control, in inverted commas, over it, and we don't have to worry anymore. So the budget's working. The only thing from the new budget we have to make sure is that we have enough money if anybody wants to go on a conference, enough money to pay subscriptions to something called NATRE, the National Association of Teachers of Religious Education. And we don't have to pay ARIAC anymore because I'm an old age pensioner, and I now, on your behalf, we get that subscription free.
No.
There are some joys to being a pensioner. So I just ask, are you happy with this budget? And that, if possible, I'm able to run the budget using some historical factors, paying for workshops, paying for subscriptions, and so on.
I think members of the SACRE can ask any questions they like. I just wonder whether the councillors particularly have got any questions, since it's council money that we're looking at here. Thanks very much then, Mary, and thank you for exercising your discretion and wisdom on using the money in the most fruitful way possible. We're very fortunate that the County Council do ensure that the SACRE and the County Advisor are given support financially and in other ways, which enables the SACRE to work and also RE to be supported more fully in schools than it would be. So thank you very much. On to item 12, the development plan. There are a couple of pages of this, and the way this works is that the grey shaded is just the heading, but then we've got a sequence of objectives with the success criteria and evidence of whether they've been achieved. And although we haven't got colours on here, we've got a RAG rating on the right-hand side. Red is so to say that we're in danger of not achieving that. Amber is, well, there's quite a lot that's red actually, but that just means that it's urgent, I suppose.
The red just means we're starting that project. We're starting a new year. So if I started off with everything green, you think, well, where are we going to develop these aspects? So all of the red, next meeting, it might be that becomes amber plus, because we haven't completed it, but we're getting on and we're working on it. So it's all about what are we doing this year to make a difference for our schools. So yes, that's why it's red. I mean, there's no harm in being red or amber, but we would hope by next November, all of those red and ambers would be green, or they'd be amber plus plus if we're not quite at the green stage, if that makes any sense.
Amber minus. I don't know. So this is the kind of programme that Mary is setting us out for the next term or two. It goes on to the end of the calendar year, in fact, I think. We've got different years here. We've got the academic year, the calendar year, the civic year, and so on and so on. This is an attempt, I think, to manage the agenda that we have and fit into it a programme of development and of dealing with the matters that need to be dealt with. Are we happy to work with this, or are there any questions? Okay. Is this the first time we've had a development plan, Mary?
No, we had a development plan last year and the year before. The one that we had last year was really about the agreed syllabus and how we were going to rewrite that, and the conference and the delivery to all schools, because from September it became statutory that all schools that maintain schools and academies that chose, but not Catholic schools, had to follow it. So this is a very different type of development plan.
Yeah, obviously the process for the agreed syllabus revision almost dictated itself. It's largely statutory, that kind of thing. So thank you very much for that. Item 13, if I can just explain very, very briefly for the benefit of our Catholic friends. Within the legislation, it is permitted for schools to ask for a variation in practice in relation to the statutory directions for collective worship in state schools. This doesn't apply to schools which have a faith foundation, which are academies or aided or however. But this provision is that should the parents or the governors require, they may request SACRE to grant them permission to vary their collective worship practice. We have the power to allow this if we're satisfied that this would be a proper and appropriate thing to do, and that suitable provision is being made for alternative collective worship. People thought that this originally meant that they would be allowed to be excused collective worship altogether. It's nothing of the sort. It is to be allowed to vary the way in which collective worship is given. And that variation may mean that instead of it having to be wholly or mainly of a broadly Christian character, it might be modified to take into account religious communities that give pupils into the school, that feed pupils into the school. In the time that I've been on Staffordshire SACRE, we have not had any request for variations of practice, but we have to put this in as a statutory element of the agenda every time. So I can record that, to the best of my knowledge, no school or school governing body or head teacher has applied for a variation in their collective worship practice. End of item. Okay. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Sorry. This does worry me a little bit, because it's a bit broad, isn't it, on what might happen. I take it, if they do apply, it will come before SACRE with all the reasons why they want it, you know, because otherwise it will be very broad in, and I think they can change it for whatever reason, sorry. So I hope there's some guidelines for when they do come, if they do apply, there's some guidelines there that we adhere to on whether they alternate whatever it is they're offering, if that's okay. Thank you.
If a school did apply, then this part of the agenda, you would receive the information from the school, and then you would also receive what it is that we as a SACRE determine would be the correct way in which to address it. So we would have that information ready for you, I promise.
Obviously, we would want to ensure that the demand was genuine, and that the school fully intended to operate within the bounds of the law, having been given the freedom to vary their practice, and also would have clear plans and systems in place to enable collective worship to be delivered according to the law. And that is what SACRE would wish to be assured about. Schools still are required to deliver collective worship, or to provide that opportunity to offer collective worship, and in principle that is something that every pupil is entitled to experience fully as part of their school experience, whatever form it takes. But thank you for the question. It's a kind of obscure little part of the law here. But I know that in some other authorities, this is a very active part of what the SACRE deals with. And they have to have proper provision within their agendas to enable them to deal with the amount of business that comes through under this heading. I think, friends, if I'm correct, we have the date of the next meetings, 26th of June and the 13th of November. And all that remains for me is to thank you all for attendance, particularly our pleasure to meet 2 new members. Hope they've enjoyed the meeting and they've certainly been able to contribute to it. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to our support team. And I formally close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Michael.